You just witnessed a very dark scenario. A scenario we all hope will never occur. However, doesn't history prove that even these scenarios cannot be excluded? And that we have to take these scenarios very seriously? Now let me take you back to the world of today. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. With these now legendary words, Charles Dickens began his novel, A Tale of Two Cities. Words that also neatly capture our world of the past decade. After all, on the one hand, we live in what might be the best era in human existence. Fewer people suffer from extreme poverty. We are better at diagnosing, treating, preventing, and curing disease than ever before. It may be the best time in history to be a woman, to be colored, to trade freely. Never before has humanity generated so much scientific, technological, and financial power as now. And freedom, the freedom we tend to take for granted so easily, well, I think nobody here would like to trade it for anything in the world. On the other hand, there is also a dark side to the story. And I am, of course, now referring to the worst of times. Every morning, I get updates on an increasing number of events. Events full of strife, destruction, chaos, and death. I also receive updates on all sorts of security threats. Threats not only directly affecting our nation's economic interests, but also our freedom, our security, and our democratic values. Some threats can come real without prior warning. The terrible crash of MH17 was a prime example of this. 298 people died, including 196 Dutch citizens. It was a harsh wake-up call. Or, as the Canadian academic Michael Ignatieff movingly wrote, when the bodies and belongings of 298 people tumbled out of the sky on July 17th, and then lay unhallowed and uncollected in the fields of eastern Ukraine, clarity seemed to follow in the silence. They were the players, and we, who had struggled at the game, were merely spectators. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember that day, July 17, clear and vividly. I received a message from our operations center. Initially, all reports were unconfirmed. We knew Dutch citizens had died, but we were in the dark about the exact circumstances. At first, it looked like a civil plane crash, but it didn't take long before I was asked to present military options to our Prime Minister. So what could we do? Send in a large number of troops to secure the crash site in the middle of an active war zone? Or be patient and focus on bringing home the victims' bodies together with their personal belongings? We chose the latter. And in hindsight, this was the best option. A forceful entry could have triggered an aggressive response. But despite taking the right option, you still feel powerless. We all know the downing of MH17 was the result of instability elsewhere. And that's just one example of a current violent conflict. Who of you would have thought a few years ago we would now see gruesome videos of hostages being beheaded at the Mediterranean beaches? Or that we would be witnessing millions of people fleeing from their homes in the Middle East? It is the best of times, it is the worst of times. Now some may ask, what's the problem? There have been conflicts across the globe for thousands of years. Let's just be happy about the progress being made. We can squeeze a little here, tweak our defense policies a little there, and just carry on. But the hard reality is that inaction is not an option. And let me give you three reasons that unite us as leaders of governmental institutions, as CEOs of multinational companies. as military leaders of more than 20 nations. 3 reasons that show our common interests and demand common answers. First, we are going through a phase of deep transformation and increasing geopolitical stress. Actors with diverging worldviews and agendas emerge. New technologies transform and disrupt our economies and our societies. And there is a deepening gap between rich and poor, both globally but also within states. In other words, fertile soil for chaos and fragility. And we are already witnessing the first symptoms of that. Europe is surrounded by a ring of fire. Russia is increasing its military funding, and the United States is focusing on Asia with fewer means and less appetite to act militarily on Europe's behalf. To me, it's clear. The clock is ticking, and we are running out of options. Now, the second reason why we have to act now is the fact that we are increasingly vulnerable to sudden shocks due to our global dependencies. These shocks can emerge from our ecological base, like pandemics. They can stem from climate change, such as crop failures, from a sudden lack of resources. But whatever they are, they can hit us with little or no warning. And if it happens, we need to be able to survive it. We need to be able to recover. The question is, can we? The third reason why we have to act now is the fact that we are dealing with transnational hybrid threats. The intellectual godfather of counterinsurgency, David Galula, famously observed, "They are everywhere, and yet they are nowhere." And I would like to add, and they are not held back by borders, by boundaries, or by legal frameworks. And I'm, of course, referring to the insurgents in Iraq, to the armies of the warlords in Afghanistan and in Africa, to the cyber hackers that invade our privacy, paralyze our financial systems, and hinder vital national and international infrastructure. And to the lone wolves in our own countries, who attack innocent civilians or blow up buildings in the name of a greater cause. But I'm also referring to terrorist threats like Daesh, perhaps the most horrendous hybrid enemy we have to face so far. Daesh was defeated and driven out of Kobani. It suffered thousands of casualties, but still, Daesh was able to retake the initiative by showing and publishing one horrifying video showing an execution. Now, how to tackle this kind of a barbarian enemy and prevent fear and slaughter of innocent people? How to stop such terrorists who operate like a conventional army of trained militants, but who also fight in the style of urban guerrillas, using modern techniques and tactics, including effective information operations? We need to have the answers to these questions. Just as we need answers to the question on how to deal with the kind of hybrid warfare we are witnessing now in Crimea and in Ukraine. Here we observe so-called little green men indoctrinating local populations and leading local separatist movements. It became clear that propaganda, provocation, and subversive actions can play a role equal to guns. No wonder many people are concerned about Russia's aggression. A month ago, I visited the Baltic states. These 3 small countries that border Russia share a genuine concern about Russia's intentions. They depend largely on their allies for the defense of their country. And as allies, we will stick together. We will support them. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned 3 reasons why inaction is not an option. Yet we all know there is no silver bullet. There is no blueprint for saving the world. And neither can we afford to take the easy way out with such excuses. Whether we like it or not, we are all in this together. and we have to find the answers together. And that's why I'm very happy to welcome you here at this conference. And I think it's of vital importance that we come to realize that we are all actors in a defensive ecosystem. A system that constantly reshapes itself. This may no longer be, if it ever was, a web that we can weave and control like a spider does. We should see it as a system energized by complex external and internal dynamics. And a system in which we all both affect and are affected by others. Now, parts of this ecosystem can be and have to be actively arranged and managed in conventional structures. Just think of the formal partnerships in which we already put a lot of effort. However, as the custodians of our society's security, we also have to explore other parts of this ecosystem. Areas that are less formalized and less structured. Areas where aligned action emerges more ad hoc and bottom-up. Areas where cooperation is extremely dynamic and flexible. Areas not described in signed agreements, but more driven by common interests and some level of mutual trust, operating through more informal networks. Take Google or Apple, for example, with their mobile app stores. They provide a free and open platform that all sorts of ecosystem partners can hitch a ride on, both planned and unplanned, while in the meantime allowing Google and Apple to benefit from the ideas, creativity, capabilities, and actions of others. I wonder whether that's something that our defense organizations might learn from. It's also why I eagerly look forward to your participation in our discussions. Your analysis, your help, and your input is needed. Today, day one of this conference will be all about the big picture, our joint analysis on the changes that we observe in the world. What has changed over time? And what could change further? What types of warfare should we be prepared for? And how are others, including potential enemies, adapting to future conflict? During day two, we will collectively explore some of the future scenarios we can envision. What potential game changers are to be found in new forms of technology? How can we exploit them? Or just as importantly, how might future enemies exploit them? Here I also want to challenge you to develop concrete ideas and share best practices that we will be able to use in the near future. In my opinion, there are 3 points to bear in mind. Firstly, there is no exclusively military answer to the challenges that we face. Military action would be like shooting at a school of fish or a flock of birds. You will hit 1 or 2 animals, but the group will disperse and regroup elsewhere. The future force we need is a deeply networked and networking force. A force that's embedded in an ecosystem that involves us all. Governmental agencies, IOs and NGOs, industries and researchers, and other stakeholders. It is in and through this ecosystem we should look for ways to address both the violent manifestations as well as the root causes of today's threats, such as preventing fragile states becoming safe havens for terrorists and criminal organizations. In other words, we must look for ways of turning the ring of fire into a ring of firefighters, or even better, a fire-resistant ring. The second point to bear in mind is that we must be alert and receptive to the application of new methods and weapons, such as nanotechnologies, enhanced civil-military cooperation, coordinated information operations, advanced intel fusing systems, and smart non-kinetic capabilities, and so on. If we want to take advantage of such emergent opportunities, we need to constantly be on the outlook for them. We should be ready to jump on them whenever and wherever they emerge. The current complexity requires this kind of flexibility. And the third point to bear in mind is that human capital remains the key asset of our future force. After all, our men and women analyze the intelligence that's gathered. Our men and women generate innovation and create solutions. Our men and women are risking their lives, facing ethical dilemmas, and deciding when and how to apply force. In short, they make the difference that sets us apart from our enemies. And this is why I want them to have the best equipment, the best protection, and the best training to do what needs to be done. Now, how can we make that happen? What future capabilities do our soldiers need to fight and overcome complex threats? We can only figure this out together. And this is why we have to develop shock-resistant partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Dickens' novel A Tale of Two Cities continues. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It is up to us to explore possible solutions, to step over our shadows, and to unite forces. To make sure that our choices are wise. But let me tell you, I would not be standing here in front of you today if I were not utterly convinced that it is achievable, that wisdom can prevail over foolishness, clever solutions over hasty answers, and imagination over a lack of ideas. After all, if we cannot give the answers to the challenges and problems that face us, who can? Thank you.